and yeah, chaos. Okay, so we are live.
Hello. I'm going to mute us. Okay. Ready when you are.
Okay, good deal. Welcome everybody to our Tuesday live stream with me, Dana Morningstar, and Angie Atkinson.
Hello.
So yes, this is welcome, Angie. And for those that are new here, this is a live stream that we do every week, every Tuesday at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we alternate channels. So this week's my channel, next week will be her channel. So make sure that you're subscribed to both of us if you want to be notified about these things. So we've got a handful of people hopping on.
Right on. Hey, everybody.
Dude, Omira, Deborah, Aliki, Jen, Lovely Cat, Bintang, Monica, welcome.
Welcome, everybody. Happy to have you. I'm just sharing this with my, sharing our stream right now with my social media people while we get started up. Okay. So Dana, you wanted to start out with something today. What, you want to talk about it?
Yes. So this is a very common question that we tend to, I think both of us probably get on a regular basis. And it basically has to do with, even though we know that this relationship is problematic, even though we know that they're abusive, even though, and they've moved on, or we've even moved on, why do we still struggle with feeling like there was something wrong with us? So what are your thoughts about that, Angie?
Well, I think it's just totally normal. I think everybody in every relationship probably finds themselves, you know, when you get out of a relationship, you even healthy relationships when they end, or healthier relationships, I think you probably imagine that person being with the person you're with, and suddenly all the things that were wrong in the relationship, you see from the outside, everything looks perfect, or you almost imagine it that way, even if you can't actually see it. And I think that's human to do that, because, you know, there are human, I'm the only one on the screen. Oh, there I am. Okay. Yeah. I was like, what happened? Okay. There are human nature issues there at play. But I think what we forget is that in the case of toxic people, they have a cyclical relationship situation. They're always on a cycle. And if you look at their old relationships and you look at their future relationships and you look at the one you had, they're all very similar, right? Mm-hmm. So it's important, I think, to take the facts into account. Maybe they do seem to be having a perfect relationship over there with the new person, but the truth is that if you think back to where your relationship was at that point, you probably seemed like you had a perfect relationship as well. And then we also have to remember the social media side of things and the public eye side of things with narcissists almost always looks better than it does behind closed doors. What are your thoughts?
I think it's a very valid point. And I like that you brought up, I like everything you brought up, but I really think you're so spot on about the fact that kind of no matter what kind of relationship we're in, mm-hmm. no matter how bad or how good, whenever things end, I think it's just that normal process for people to kind of rehash and figure out, like, where did things go wrong and what could I have done different, if anything? And,
sorry.
You okay?
Got really loud. Go ahead.
Okay. And, you know, that just that rehashing of like what happened and why and what was my part in things, and could things have gone any different? And I think that's the mindset of a healthy person, to want to try to figure out what is my part in this. But where that can kind of lead us astray is when we're dealing with abuse, because then we can almost become hyper accountable for things and thinking like, well, we could have done more to make things work. And that's not the case. Any relationship with abuse in it is just, it's not workable, because it's not you. It'll never be you. It's always them. Right. And we can't, I mean, there's nothing to really, there is no justification for being abused.
Right. And on that same note, you know, while I understand and it's human for us to think about other people that are in relationships with our exes, it's really unhealthy for us to focus on it, like you're saying, for too long. And so I think that's important as well to remember, like you said. So
Yeah.
anyway.
I think I guess one of the things that helped me to break free from that was detaching emotionally. And my situation, the first time around, I found out so much all at once that it would have been really difficult for me to gloss over that and justify it. It was just, you stumble across somebody's double life and fake emails and dating sites and different names, and like everything about them was a lie. It was very easy for me to emotionally detach and just realize I got caught up with a con artist. Like, I just need to get out of here. Yeah. But I think even though for people that didn't have the benefit of that have had kind of that slow erosion of their reality, I think you can still kind of view it in the same way. It's sort of like viewing a situation that you're not emotionally invested in, like Bernie Madoff, for example, like a financial planner. We wouldn't tell ourselves, oh, I wonder if he's ever going to be a good financial planner for somebody.
Right.
Right. And the reason being, and my guess would be that all of the people that got caught up with Bernie Madoff don't think that either. They're like, that guy was a con artist. He's never going to change. And even if he does, F him, I don't care. He's stolen so much money and done so much damage. Like, I don't even want anything to do with him again. Right.
Yeah.
So it's the same thing for us, just emotionally detaching enough to realize, like, this is not, the abuse part was not me, it was them. And, just go away.
Totally. Yeah. And something I recommend for my clients all the time, and people on my channel and here, if they want to know, is write down when you're in your most emotional moments, right after the breakup or even before it, while you're still planning to get out, take the time to either write down or type down or whatever, the feelings that you're having when you're in those emotional states, the anger that you have, the sadness, the fear, whatever. Because what happens is that, literally write down as much detail as you can stand about what you're feeling in those moments and why. Because and then you save that, put it away. Don't look at it unless you need to. But when you feel the oh man, I miss this person, or I can't believe this, she's doing so much better, or he's doing so much better with my new person, with their new person, pull that thing out and remind yourself what you went through, because none of that is relevant if you know that person is going to be so horribly toxic and abusive to you. And I think, like with Dana, like you said, with your, the person with the double life, write down how that made you feel. If you're struggling, even if you're not struggling now, like as you go forward, you may need that. And if you haven't done it yet, do it now before it's, before you get any further away from what happened. I think that's really helpful for people.
Yeah, I would agree. And then I think just to add to that too, like one of the other reasons I think a lot of people tend to get sucked back, and they tell themselves, or they'll tell us, like, but I love this person. I love him. I love her. Mm-hmm. And sort of like that's a reason, like that's a valid reason.
Justification.
Yeah. And it's not. It's like, okay, you love them. So what?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like we can't be driven by emotions to have us do destructive things. Sort of like if I don't like my job, or if I don't want to pay my bills, like there's just certain things that we have to do regardless. And loving someone that hurts you isn't a valid reason to go back. And that this takes practice, telling ourselves no.
Right.
And kind of holding that ground and realizing, like, oh, really telling ourselves, okay, so what? That's interesting, but like, you love him. Okay, that's interesting. And I know it's hurtful, but you got to just close this door. Like, we can't keep going back through it, especially if there's other people that are getting hurt by our decisions,
Right. Well, like, I love cheeseburgers and French fries, but if I eat them every day, I will weigh 500 pounds. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's, or somebody might love a good margarita, but they're an alcoholic and they can't have a margarita, or they're going to lose all their stuff. Or their
those are some better analogies. I like that. Yeah, we might love something, but if it's destructive for us, we just have to back away.
Yeah. And that's where I think on the same note, we can point out that toxic relationship, love in general, but even toxic relationships, they affect the same part of the brain as drug abuse, or drug addiction or alcohol addiction or shopping addiction or gambling addiction or whatever. It's food addiction. It's all the same. It's that, well, anyway, we won't go into all of it, but it's the same part of the brain. So you have to see this person as an addiction that you're trying to get over if you need to. It helps.
Yes, absolutely. And Karen, to add to that, says, love does not hurt. That is not love. That is trauma bonding. Yes.
Damn right.
Yep. Yep.
Yep.
Totally. I agree completely.
Yep. My husband's mother, who has passed away now, his adopted mother. And the only reason I say that is because people who have followed the story know that he was left in a phone booth at birth. But the mother that adopted him and raised him, she always told me, love is not supposed to hurt. And it was a profound moment when she said it to me, because she was actually talking about my own mother in this case, who had been very abusive to me in my life. So it was interesting to see that and to hear that. When you said that, I kind of got goosebumps. Anyway. All right.
Let's see. Eileen says, my narcissist spent the whole relationship telling me that it takes two to have problems. He wanted me to say that his abuse was my fault too. No matter what he did, it was not just him, he said. It was so confusing. Common. Yes. And that's so common, because I think that the map of the world that most of us have with how we interact with others is the belief that, it takes two to tango, that relationship, if things in a relationship are a problem, it's a relationship issues. It's not just an individual issue. And, forgive and forget, love conquers all, commitment is forever. A lot of these kind of beliefs without proper context can really lead to a lot of confusion, and can really lead to a person getting involved in some really, deeply abusive and manipulative situations. And so, and for a narcissist, that's their mindset. It's this mindset of, but look at what you made me do. You forgot to buy bread at the store, and that's why I yelled at you, or that's why I hit you, or that's why I stole from you. I mean, that's why I cheated on you. Like, they can spin things in all kinds of crazy ways. And in their mind, they have a justification, but just because they get frustrated, there's no excuse for abuse. And they don't ever understand that, because they feel very entitled to treat other people the way that they do. And us trying to get through to them, like, it's not okay. Like, you can get frustrated, but it's not okay for you to yell or hit or scream or cheat or steal. That doesn't compute. And at that point, at that point, we just have to really detach and just realize, okay, I'm not dealing with a mature adult here. Like, I'm dealing with the person who has kind of the moral understandings of a child.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting. You said, you're triggering me today, girl. You said, I'm just kidding. You said, what did you say? You said, look what you made me do. And that was one of those things I heard growing up, and not ever when it was something nice. And I think that's, in some form or fashion, a common thing. But I think what's exactly what you said, and to maybe tack on a little bit, I would say, when somebody says something like that to you, like, this is all your fault, you made me do this, remember that you are responsible for your actions and reactions just as everyone else is. So I don't think you should argue with them when they are in that mode, but I think that you should know that if you're seeing that in your relationship, get out as soon as you can, because that kind of not taking responsibility is a huge red flag for toxic people. Yeah.
And it also shows you that they're a million miles away from ever changing.
They don't change.
Right. I mean, there has to be that level of awareness there, of an accountability.
Right.
That acknowledgement of, I did something wrong, and they don't ever get to that point, because in their mind, they keep spinning and justifying things. because they just feel like, well, you know what? I got frustrated and then I yelled at you because
Right.
you frustrated me and you did this and you did that. And it's like, dude, this is life. Like, you can't just go around treating people like this because you get upset or you get
Right.
frustrated or, like,
Yeah.
it's just, but this is kind of trying to explain the basics of adult behavior to another adult. And that's
Right.
like, that doesn't
Didn't
work.
have to do that.
Most people
Right.
have this stuff mastered by the time they hit first grade.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yeah. And on that same token, as you go forward, you don't want to, well, you will want validation from that person somehow or another. I mean, almost everyone says this to me at some point in their recovery. They say, I just wish they would admit it, or I just wish they would say that this happened, or that I'm not crazy, or whatever it is that they need validation on specifically. And I think that we have to recognize as survivors of this type of abuse that we're not getting it from that person. And if we get it, it's going to be with conditions and strings. And so we have to be okay moving forward and validating ourselves in the process, which is harder, but totally doable.
yeah. And let me add to that too. People think that, right? Like, we just want to hear that from our ex of, oh, I'm so sorry. I messed up. You didn't deserve that. I was a jerk, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. I will tell you, we might think that, but honestly, that's one of the worst things that can happen to a person, because it sucks them right back into that cycle again of thinking maybe this time will be different. Maybe this time they understand. This time they seem to have awareness and accountability. And so maybe I can make things work. So
Yeah.
it's really, in some ways, it's a big gift to not be able to have them acknowledge the hurt that they've caused, because it can be 100 times more damaging when they do acknowledge it. And like you said, Angie, when they do, it comes with strings and more games and insincerity attached to it. And it's
Yeah.
just right back in the cycle again.
Agreed. Yeah. Agreed. Here's an interesting comment from Truth Seeker Forever.
Okay.
Hi, Dana and Angie. Could you share your thoughts on this? Do you think it's reasonable to try to form a bond with someone who's a member of a cultish faith and I am an opposer to that cult? And then she adds, I've been a member as well, but woke up to the narcissistic abuse going on in there and quit. Yet my boyfriend is in blissful denial and desperately holds on to this community. That's a tough question. What do you think? We've talked before about how she says, wait a minute. She says it causes friction between us. And I have flashbacks seeing his worrying about adhering to the absurd rules. You and I talked one time and you said something that just totally, I made a whole video about it. It totally blew my mind. And it was so true. You said being with a narcissist is like being in a cult.
Yeah.
And I found that so profound and insightful. I literally made an entire video about it. It was really good. And so what would you say when you read this and you think about some, and we're not going to call out any specific religion here, but we all know there are religions out there that are cultish and there are cults out there. So what would you say to this woman in this situation?
I would say I would get clear on what your deal breakers are. And if it sounds like she's already dating this person.
Mm-hmm.
So since you're already dating, I would get real clear. I for sure would use birth control.
Mm.
You don't want to compound issues and get pregnant or have even the accident. And then you've got a whole Katie Holmes, Tom Cruise situation. So like seeing things clearly and not holding on to hope that if we get married, if we have a baby, then things will be different.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's a problem now, getting crystal clear with yourself as far as like, okay, at what point, when is it going to be bad enough? Where's my line in the sand? At what point do I say enough is enough and I walk away?
Yeah.
And to hold that line, to try to date somebody with the intention of trying to deprogram them from some really skewed beliefs, generally, I mean, it's a crapshoot that's going to work.
Right. You got a 50-50 shot, I guess, right?
Yeah, and you do. And then not only that, but if it's a religion they've been involved with for a long period of time, especially if it's something that they were born into, then realizing too that things might not be a big deal now, but after a person gets married, the same goes for two different faiths getting married. Yeah. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And people tend to think, oh, it's not going to be a big deal. But ask yourself, is it going to be a big deal if we ever have children? Because most people tend to think, oh, it's fine, this is workable. And then a child comes along and then all of a sudden holidays are a big deal, kind of rites and rituals become a thing. So
many things. Yeah.
So many things, getting clear with yourself, getting clear with the other person, and then seeing the situation clearly and then trusting yourself or getting to the point where you can walk away if this is not working.
Yeah. One family I know was involved in a cultish type religion, and the mother, as the children grew up, she decided to go away from that particular group because her husband passed away and they expected her to never marry again. And she was only in her 30s, and she did get remarried and had, long story short, her children stayed in this religion and she was not allowed to attend her own daughter's wedding. She had to sit outside of the temple and cry because they wouldn't let her in because she was not considered a good whatever they are. I'm not going to talk about it, but and I thought that was shocking. And it's just one example of how this can really, and that's after many years of being excluded from her children's stuff, but she let them stay in because in her mind, she sort of still believed, I guess, in there. She was born into that faith, but then wasn't allowed to continue because she got remarried. It was weird. Anyway.
That is, yeah.
The other thing I would say is everything Dana said, first of all, is entirely on point, of course. But I would add, you say, is it reasonable to try to form a bond with someone who is a member of this and you are an opposer of this? The thing you have to know is that cults are, I think, most of these cultish type groups, let's just say that, they are highly focused on brainwashing and conditioning. And so it's going to be really, you're going to be fighting, actively having to fight that conditioning that it's very subtle. And if you've already been involved before, maybe you're strong enough and it won't ever affect you. But let's be honest, we're all human. And if this is someone you love and this is someone whose opinion you value on everything else, it's going to be tough. Is it reasonable? I don't know that I would call it reasonable personally, but if you're already together and you're already dating and, things are working out okay, I think I would, unless this person's really ready to step away, I think you would definitely want to consider it a temporary situation and consider what Dana said, because those are all incredibly valid points here.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Well, true. My pleasure. Let's see.
We had, let's see, hold on, this chat, there's lots of great questions in here. We've got one from Bonnie, who says, if you have CPTSD, how does one separate real abusive behavior from another person from our PTSD perspective of reality?
Well, you have to choose your perspective to start with. But I guess I'm not entirely sure. I mean, toxic is toxic. If someone's abusing you, it doesn't matter if they're your abuser or not. Do you want to, I'm a
little confused.
Go ahead.
Too.
Say again.
I said, I'm a little confused by the question too.
Okay. Well, let's ask Bonnie to clarify and then let's go on to the next one for right now. Is that okay?
That works. Yeah.
Okay. This is a good one from Monica. She says that she doesn't understand why, narcissists who can, know they can get away with treating I think she means their significant others like crap. Why do they not lash out at work? Why don't they act crazy at work? And I think that's a perfect example of how behind closed doors they treat almost always the people they think are closest to them or they feel are closest to them in their little inner circle are the worst treated. Whereas like with myself, the people on my inside circle, those are the people I, do all the best things for, or I treat the best. I treat everybody well, but you know what I mean? And with narcissists, it's almost like their circles are backward. Their inner circle is the one they abuse and their far out circle is the one who thinks they're hanging the moon all the time. What do you think about that, Dana? I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. They don't act this way oftentimes in front of judges or coworkers or around police because they don't want consequences. So they understand what they're doing is wrong. But even though they feel entitled to treat us this way, they have those same feelings at work and with the judge and with the police. But they are smart enough, are capable enough to, keep quiet because they know that the other person has more power than them.
There it is. Yeah.
That's really what it is. Yeah.
Then they come home and they spit it all out on you. That happened to me a bunch of times. Didn't even know why I was in trouble. You have that ever? Did you?
Not with anybody that I've dated, but family members, yes.
Yeah. I had it with my ex-husband. It was rough.
Yeah, it is rough, especially if you're like, I don't even know what's going on. And I'm just walking into nothing I can do is right. And I'm getting yelled at for like the smallest things. And you're just starting to walk on eggshells. And you just kind of realize very quickly, like, okay, you know, someone's in a bad mood. Like, I'm just going to go lie low kind of a thing. That's a hard way to live.
It's horrible. Yeah. Nobody should have to. Shouldn't have to walk on eggshells in your own home.
I agree.
Yeah.
There's a question here. I think I'm getting bits and pieces of it. So Angie, if you've gotten more of it, chime in here.
Okay.
From X Dude, who says he's 17 and a half. It sounds like he might be from another country. He's concerned about his education, and if he's not sure that his parents, kind of what's going to happen when he turns 18, if they're going to kick him out, and if they're going to cut off any financial support for his education. And he's sort of wondering if he should just plan on, from what I understand, if he should plan on going no contact at 18.
I see that he says he's in college, but he's not sure if he can get grants and stuff because in his country, running away at a young age is not an everyday thing. A lot of people are saying you should apply for grants, but I'm trying to see if.
Are you X Dude? Are you in college or university?
He is now, he says.
Okay, he is now, and it's not in the US.
I think not.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess the way I would look at it is if you're going off to college, then you're not running away.
Right.
I don't know how other countries do it, but at least, you know, here in the United States, normally people for their first year of university, they stay on campus. So I don't know if that's the case in the country that you would be attending school. But
yeah,
I would schedule an appointment to go talk with a financial advisor at the university that you think you're going to be going to, and say, you know what, I don't have any parental support for funding, and I'm going to need to figure out like room and board and tuition, and what are my options?
Yeah.
And
sometimes you can work on campus. Like you can work in the cafeteria or something, or, you know, on your off hours, or there are lots of things you can do. I don't know, again, in what country you are, but that's a great idea. What I did when I was 18 is I went to college. I lived on campus the first year. I got a job. And then I moved into an apartment at the end of that school year, and I stayed where I was going to school. That's how I got away. So, and then I was on my own for paying for it, but I managed. You manage. So, yeah.
I would just plan on, even if they offer financial support, if your home environment's toxic and if the finances are used to kind of puppeteer you, I would really strongly encourage you to line up alternative means of financial support so you're able to break free from that. And then that way you're not having to be at their whim in order to try to get your college paid for, because that can be very difficult. Sort of like, okay, I've got to keep doing what they want to do, and I've got to maybe major in what they want me to major in if they're going to pay for it. And it's a long time to have a lot of strings attached. So
true. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, and Bonnie clarified here. And actually, real quick, I saw a live stream donation. Let me scroll up. This chat is just flying today. From Linda Latina. Thank you so much for the live stream donation.
Right on.
Asked a question, or if she just, I don't think so. I think it was just the donation. Well, thank you. Bonnie did clarify. Let me scroll down, see if I can find, there she is. Okay. She says, what I meant was that by just phrases or certain words or attitudes that might be similar to a past abuser, itself isn't actual abuse. It just triggers emotional flashbacks in me. Okay.
That's great, actually. Can I just
go for it
in here? Okay. So just a little while ago, Dana said a phrase that triggered me personally, which was look what you made me do. See how I said that with my teeth closed? Because that phrase in particular was one that I would hear, while there was blood running down my face or whatever, as a younger person. And um, it's triggery for me. But the difference here is that I know Dana is not in any way a toxic person. She's definitely not just recently smacked me in my face or whatever. And I choose to note the trigger, be aware of it. And sometimes when you just call it out, like I did you guys hear me call it out a minute ago? That helps in itself, just to call it out and say, well, there's a trigger, but then to logically rethink that trigger, even though that's one of my really deeply ingrained ones, because it goes way back for me. It's not something that I'm sitting here shaking about or freaking out about. And that's the thing. When you go through the healing process, you have to, for me, I have to logically see things I have to stop seeing things from an emotional perspective and start seeing them from a logical perspective for me. That doesn't work for everybody, but I think for me, if I can look at it and go, okay, scientifically speaking, here's a trigger. A trigger is something that happens when you hear an old phrase or you smell an old smell or you this, that, the other thing, whatever, and it makes you remember how it feels and your body goes into fight or flight mode and you start to freak out. I didn't even go into fight or fight mode. I got a tiny bit flustered and that was it, because by now I've logicked myself out of that. I've stopped feeling scared when I hear that phrase. And I think that's a really important, for me, has been very important to see it scientifically as much as possible for all of this recovery stuff. What do you think, Dana? What are your thoughts?
Yeah. And I would say along those lines of, I guess just to reiterate what you were saying is you could have even like a mantra. So when you do feel triggered, and it's bringing yourself back into the present moment and just telling yourself something like, okay, like I'm here now. Like I am here now. I'm here now. And just getting grounded. But let me kind of elaborate on something. So what I have found, and I think this is something that a lot of people struggle with, is they'll go through one abusive situation or manipulative situation with a person, and then they get out of that and they're working towards healing. And then they might have similar things in like another person that show up, and more of like behavior. Right. So like the example that you were giving. So I had said the phrase, oh, well, the abuser might say, well, look at what you made me do. And then that was a trigger for you. For me, like one of the earliest signs I had of that the second person in my life was problematic was I'm like, man, it's so uncanny how many things, like little things, I get the same like charming, too good to be true kind of vibe from both of these guys. Like, that's so weird. And I at the time I was like, oh, it's just because I'm dysregulated from what happened. I still have some healing to do. I don't want to miss out on a good person because guy number two hasn't really done anything yet. But in many ways it was just all of these subtle manipulations and subtle lies that like the deeper part of my brain was picking up on, but that my like logic and critical thinking part of my brain wasn't. Because I was like, well, it was so easy to gloss over.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think sometimes when we're having those feelings of, ooh, that person just kind of feels unsafe and I don't know why, it's a good sign to just take a few steps back emotionally or physically, and to maybe do some journaling or turn on your voice recorder on your phone and just start talking it out. Like, really, what is it?
Yeah.
And not justify it. Because I think so many of us are like, man, I feel so judgmental. I feel like I'm being too much of a perfectionist. I mean, I'm not perfect either. And like there are these, it's going to be real easy to rationalize some like mildly problematic things. But sometimes that these are the early warning signs. And if you think about kind of finding somebody in your life that you're like, okay, I feel comfortable around this person. And even if there certain things are the same, like maybe not behavior wise. Like I think the behavior wise part of it can really be a big early warning sign.
Yeah.
But like maybe certain phrases that they say, certain foods that they eat, like those kinds of things, realizing, okay, do I what's going on here? Like, do I normally feel off when other people say these things, or is it just this person? And trying to get grounded about thinking about how you feel around a person that has proven themselves to be emotionally safe. And for me, that person is my brother. So I always, whenever I encounter a person that does something squirrely, I'll ask myself, I'm like, well, how would my brother, would he ever treat a girl like that?
Good point.
And what would he think if I were to forward these texts onto him? What would he say?
Yeah.
And then generally I have my answer.
Yep. Good point. Good point. Yeah. Like, so you have kind of a control group almost with your brother, a control person. Yeah, that's really good. I like that. Science, baby. Okay. I wanted to bring, here's one from Linda Latina. I thought we should grab it really quick. She said, how can you start to heal from a narcissistic parent who's still in the picture? I would, I'll just start with that because I see.
Yes, please. Mm-hmm.
All right. So been there, done that. And the truth is, while you can certainly, set your boundaries, enforce them, etc., what's going to happen is that you're going to be re-injured again and again and again. And so while I do understand why in some cases people choose not to go no contact with parents who are toxic, I always recommend going no contact with parents who are toxic if possible, or very, very low contact. I would start, if you have to stay in contact, then you have to go very low contact and you have to go emotionless contact only. So if they're in your life because, your other parent, would be abused more if you weren't, or whatever your reason is, then you have to change the way you communicate with that parent and keep it brief and keep it without emotion. But is that going to help you heal? It might make you feel a little more empowered, but I don't believe that you can fully heal I couldn't fully heal without going no contact. How about I say that? I can't say what I know about you to be true, but I can say for me personally, I needed to go no contact in order to even, I went no contact several years ago. And just the other day, I had another big breakthrough moment about an issue we're not going to go into right now, but something that was really deeply affecting my life from very early, a parental alienation issue. So yeah, that's what I would say. What do you think?
Yeah, well, I like what you said about going kind of no contact emotionally. Mm-hmm. I think that's huge. And one of the things, I guess for me in my situation, I had to quit being surprised by their behavior. Like it had to just get to the place where, and it took me decades. Because, because I guess it's because the behavior is always changing. You know what I mean? I think that's why it continues to catch us off guard. It's a bunch of just nonsensical, hurtful, degrading, dehumanizing, just ridiculous, awful behavior. And so to just realize, yeah, that's what they do.
Yeah.
Like, this is what they do. And I just need to quit being surprised by it. And I think you'll find that when you are able to emotionally detach like that and realize, like, when there's just no expectations of appropriate behavior,
right,
it makes interacting with them so much more tolerable. Because it's like, yeah, of course that person yelled at the waiter. Of course they're, like criticizing me about my weight or my clothes or my appearance or something. Like, of course they do that because that's what they do. And then if I leave that interaction, and like Angie was saying, going low contact, if you're not going to go no contact, when you do go low contact, you set the pace. So instead of them being like, well, it's Christmas, I really want you to come visit, can you please stay for 2 weeks? And you're thinking, and like, you really know, you're like, you know what, 5 hours is my absolute max. Then to give up the fantasy that you can actually stay for 2 weeks and it's going to be enjoyable, because it's not. And then be like, okay, if I'm going to go visit, I'm going to go stay in a hotel, and just let them know, like, you know what, it's just much smoother for everybody involved. I'm just going to stay in a hotel. I'll come over and visit. And then that way you can remove yourself from the situation when it's time for you to go.
Yeah, totally.
And like, you set the pace, you control the tempo and the interaction and all of that. And then it's so much more enjoyable Because then when they do start acting up, you're like, yeah, of course. Like, of course they do this because this is what they do.
Yeah.
And then you leave and,
Yeah.
you know.
And that's totally in line with the way I would roll, because I look at it logically, which is exactly what Dana's describing here. And I think on the flip side of that, if you get to that place where they are, because they'll always be like this, dancing on your boundary lines, right? They're always going to be right here and tiptoeing over to see if they can push it back further. And I suggest, if you're in that situation, like, for example, like Dana said, you're in a hotel, you're just going to come over for Christmas Day and you're going to leave or whatever. Then if they start pushing you, you leave right now. You know what I mean? So like if it's 2:00 on Christmas afternoon, you're about to open presents and the person is like, well, I really want to give you this present, but if you're not going to stay, then, I'm going to go ahead and give it to your sister, or whatever crazy stuff they say. Then you go, okay, go ahead and give it to her, and you leave. Even if it's Christmas afternoon, you know what I'm saying? It's you set your boundaries and you stand behind them firmly, and you don't allow them to even put one toe on them. That's how it has to go. And don't be scared to leave, because they'll learn that they can no longer do that to you if you stay that strong. It's hard, but it's doable. But I will tell you, just between me, you, and these other 88 people here right now, I tried that. I tried to set those boundaries in my parental narcissism relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And bad things happened to me that eventually caused, she went above and beyond. She went so far as to, I think you guys know the story, some of you, she called CPS on me and told a lot of lies. And she tried to have my children taken from me. Obviously they weren't taken, and it was fine because they came in my house, they talked to my kids, they looked around, everything was fine.
Yeah.
But it was horrible at that moment. So it was one of those things that, you want to be aware. Sometimes when you do try to put those boundaries in place, they will quite literally climb right over and try to tear your head off. I mean, okay,
Yeah.
that's not literal, but you know what I'm saying. They will definitely go further than you might expect. So just be aware and be very careful with what access you give them to your life and beyond. Just be careful.
And yes, and a great way to kind of tell too, if your approach is working, like if you're actually going to be able to heal, is to pay attention. So like not only what Angie said, okay, do they escalate? Do things then get taken to a place where you're like, this is way past my line in the sand.
Right.
Like they're not giving me any choice. Like they have now become dangerous and destructive to my family. Like I have got to cut this person off because what,
Yeah.
that's so outrageous. And so, but another sign, if it doesn't go that far, is to pay attention to how you feel. So you can tell, because crazy making is always going to be crazy making. Okay. So if you get back to your hotel, let's say you're visiting your parents for a week. Okay. Mm-hmm. And you're going over there for, I don't know, during the afternoon, and then you're going back to your hotel, like around dinner or whatever. And then so you're spending, let's say 6 hours a day with your family. If you're getting back to your hotel and you're rehashing conversations, you're stewing about things, it's really getting you fired up. You're squeezing the steering wheel on the way back. You're losing sleep over it. Then these are all signs of, okay, I need to dial it back even more. And I need to kind of figure some stuff out here. It's normal when you're around crazy makers to get frustrated and feel kind of crazy, but like I think a normal level of crazy making is, let's say, for example, if you were to talk to a friend on the phone and they were to say, hey, how's it going with your family? If you were like, oh, crazy is as crazy does. And you're just kind of at that level of like, yeah, it is what it is. Like you're annoyed, but you're not an anxious, unhinged mess over it. So if you can kind of keep things at that mild level of like annoyance, irritation, like that's always going to be there with crazy makers. But if it gets to the point where it's really disrupting you, if you're needing to go back to your hotel and like drink excessively, or like, talk to your best friend for 3 hours to decompress, like that kind of stuff, it still needs to be dialed back.
Yeah.
That's impacting your mental health too much.
And I think that a lot of people, especially with family, parents, parents especially even, I think people think it's wrong to go no contact. Yeah. And I think that in some cases, That might be true, but not when we're talking about people who are toxic abusers. Because as we all know, this continues into adulthood. Even if you become financially and otherwise independent,
Yeah.
they still try to control you. They still try to run your life. And I think that I spent way too many years feeling like I was obligated to someone who was abusing me and trying to control me. And you can abuse someone from across town. you
Mhm.
know, you can, even across the country if you're real skilled. And my point for saying that is that you don't have to be in contact with someone just because they gave birth to you or they gave you, a childhood or of some sort. I mean, because they raised you up. Grateful if you need to be, and we all should be up to a point grateful that we didn't die along the way.
Mhm.
But you don't have to continue to live with toxicity just because that person has their name on your birth certificate. I'm just saying
Yeah.
sometimes it is what it is. I mean, I have my little family here at home, but as far as biological family goes, I'm limited on what I've got going on in that respect. And so what I have found is that sometimes your family are people who may not look like you or have the same blood as you. They're just people who you feel, and people who feel you in your heart, and people who you can trust, people who you would let in your house if you're not there and not worry that they're going to look into all your stuff or steal from you or whatever. That's a weird thing to say, but that's
Mhm.
how I kind of figured it out.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Slavic princess, this was back to the question that Bonnie had about how do you tell the difference between kind of a CPTSD reaction and a person actually being abusive.
Mm-hmm.
Slavic princess had said, basically asking yourself, would a healthy person feel reactive, hurt, or neutral to the way this trigger occurred? And I would agree to a point with that. Here's what tripped me up though,
Mm-hmm.
is in my situation. So with the second narcissist in my life, here's an example. Okay. He had told me that he was basically, he was on his way to divorce his wife. Like he was separated from her and that they were still under the same roof, but they were actually decent friends. They had just grown apart, kind of a thing. I believed him because I went through something very similar with my ex-husband. So it was sort of like, okay, I can kind of get that feeling of like things are just over, like there's no bitterness. It's just this awkward in between stage where you're under the same roof and kind of like, now what, And so anyways, I had told him, I'm not going to date a married man. So you need to move out and file papers. And he
Yeah.
did. And so I thought, well, he's taking all the actions that a person who is sincere would actually take.
Right.
And but I remember I was talking to a friend about this, and she was even saying, she's like, yeah, she's like, well, I think he's just telling you everything you want to hear. And I'm like, well, maybe he is, like, but I don't think, who would really file papers and move out? Like
Right.
that's extreme, right? And anyway, so that was like what caught my radar at first. But then I had other people around me that were, of course, justifying his actions. I had a good friend who was like, she's like, I started dating when I was separated. She's like, it was a very similar situation. Like her and her ex, their divorce was amicable. And, she ended up marrying her now husband. She'd only been separated for a few months when they began dating, and they're a healthy, well-adjusted couple. And so I was sort of like, well, I mean, I guess it could work. Like, I don't want to miss out on a good thing, right?
Right.
By having too high of boundaries. And um, so I guess the big lesson learned there is, well, I guess a couple of things. I think one, a person needs a full year after they divorce they need to be officially divorced, and then really, I
Right.
think it's a good idea for them to be living on their own, independent for a full year before they even start dating again, because the odds of them making you into a rebound are really high. And this actually turned out that this wasn't even real to begin with. He'd upped and left his wife multiple times whenever he wanted to cheat.
Wow.
So yeah. But I guess the takeaway was, if something feels off, it's worth taking a few steps back, even if everybody in the room or everybody around you is telling you that this is not a problem.
Yeah.
If it's a problem for you, then it is a problem. And so yeah, it's a hard line to walk. I get it. I
It
guess it
is.
goes erring on the side of caution.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, yeah, I'm same page.
Because I guess, because to clarify, so like what I was saying earlier with my brother, if something is squirrely, like, I don't know, like maybe more squirrely than that, I would normally ask myself, like, how does my brother, how would he feel about this? You
Yeah.
know? But if it's something that's more subtle, because that's what tripped me up too with the first narcissist in my life, was it was a bunch of stuff that I could easily excuse. Like, well, okay, that could be the case, or, oh, you know, but my radar was going off. And I guess maybe the bigger thing here is asking yourself, does your radar normally go off? Because
Right.
that's, I guess, if I had to boil it down to anything, it would be that I don't have my radar going off around emotionally safe people.
That's a great point. Yeah. And to add to what you said, for those who don't have someone in their life who they can use as a control person,
Mm-hmm.
um, I suggest, if you have children or a niece or something that you're very close with, imagine your children growing up and telling you the same stories you're dealing with now. And ask yourself, how would I feel? What would I say to my own child? Because that will change your perspective very quickly and in a similar way. So,
Yeah.
yeah, good thinking. Okay. um, yeah, and this is an interesting thing Slavic Princess is saying, and I don't mean to keep talking about the same person
Yeah.
because I know you just talked about her, but she's saying that her father, in this case, she said, not to sound conceited, but I even use perfect grammar. I always give an intellectual response because I felt like my intellect was constantly tested by my father. And I think that is an example of one kind of narcissist. I see it myself pretty often. But then she says, then I thought to myself, I never, and I'm only saying this because I think it's helpful, but she said, I thought to myself, I never have to justify my feelings, needs, and desires to a normal person unless I absolutely have to. And I think that's what you kind of were indicating as well. But I think that's a helpful, come up with some kind of a mantra or an affirmation for yourself like that. If you're finding yourself trying to justify yourself to a toxic person, because I think that's important. You, like Dana said, you don't have to justify yourself. You don't have to, think about who you feel good around and who you don't, and what the differences are. Just to reiterate, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thoughts, anything?
Just a comment about from C. Rob, who says that she keeps practicing the zipper on the inside. And the more I think about it, the more it helps. And this was a concept that we came across in book club.
Mm.
And I forget which book it was in, but it was about boundaries. And the author just articulated this so perfectly. And it was basically the concept of, for so many of us, for a wide variety of reasons, we've been going through life with like the zipper on the outside. And so other people would just walk up to us, and whatever, they would set the pace, whatever they wanted to know, we were a total open book. They unzipped us.
Mm-hmm.
And so we just spilled everything out. And so this concept in the book was basically flipping that zipper on the inside. We control it. So somebody else might ask us about our life or ask us to do things or whatever, but we don't have to instantly say yes, and we don't have to instantly just unzip and expose our lives.
I like that.
I do too. And so that's really cool. See, Rob, I think that's such a game changer when we start setting the pace and realize, because we talked about this last week, like so many of us don't have a problem with, we're like, oh, our life's an open book. We have no problem being helpful or being open about certain things. But with pathological people, that can really, the unintended consequence of that is it can really set a tone of basically an unequal balance of power.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, boom, they start asking for more and more. And if we've never experienced a person that's problematic like that, then we just keep unzipping more and more because we don't like confrontation. We don't like conflict. We just are more comfortable having peace in our life. So in order to go along with them, or in order to get along with them, we just keep going along. But the next thing we know, we're like way off in the bushes somewhere. And we're like, how did I get here?
I've been there.
Yeah, me too.
I've been there. And you're like, what?
Yeah.
I can't, yeah, I get it.
There was somebody in the support group the other day who summed this up so perfectly. Uh, she just articulated it so well. It was something like when dealing with manipulative people, there's kind of these three phases of awareness. And the first one is you see toxic behavior after the fact.
Mm.
You're like, what on earth just happened? Right?
Yeah.
Then the second phase is you start noticing it when it's happening. And it's that feeling of like those internal alarms going off of like, wait a minute, am I hearing this correctly? Is it them? Is it me? This is kind of weird. I don't know. I'm not comfortable with that. Or that person's a jerk. Like, that's ridiculous. Right. And then the third wave of that is you start anticipating that they're going to actually do that.
And changing your behavior.
And changing your behavior ahead of time. Yep.
I did it.
Yep.
Yep. And when I was ashamed of myself for a long time because I did that. I did. And I thought, at first I thought to myself, oh, I got this. I can handle this better than most people because I'm an empath and I can feel people. And so I know that if I don't act this way, then this person won't do this to me. But the thing is, you should not have to spend. It wasn't just that. It was beyond that. It was, I literally stopped being myself over the course of the time I was with this person in order to keep them from going ballistic on me. But there was always like this learning curve. There was always some new thing that came up, some new way they tried to get me to react and freak out and whatever. And it's not worth it. You shouldn't have to lose yourself to be in love. Being in love or being in any relationship at all, it should be a two-way street. Certainly in a healthy relationship, sometimes it's 60-40 or 80-20, but it fluctuates and goes back and forth, and it generally maintains a healthy balance. And that's something that toxic relationships can't do. So if you can't be yourself, you're in the wrong relationship. I know that's kind of an off point considering what we're talking about, but I just had to throw it out there.
Oh, I think that's spot on.
Yeah.
That's most profound things, all conversation.
You might be right. Thank you. Bonnie said something that I think is interesting too. She said her mother also constantly questioned her intellect and her ex's father. She realized she was a lot smarter than they were, been their girl. And then she felt very angry at how they devalued her constantly. And I think in this situation, I mean, it can affect your entire life, because if you don't believe you're intelligent, even if you actually are, it can affect your ability to achieve in life in general and to trust yourself and go forward. So I think based on what I just wanted to add in that comment. Go ahead.
Yep. And here's something from Rum Dog, who says, if you have health problems, don't be surprised if they get better or go away completely after going no contact.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing the stuff that can resolve, stuff you wouldn't even think is connected.
Yeah. Well, and with your history as a psychiatric nurse,
mm-hmm.
you must have seen this kind of thing. Some, do you think? I mean, I did some research on it, and I found out that a lot of times fibromyalgia is connected, and a lot of other things are connected to growing up abused or long-term abuse. But did you see any of that in your previous line of work, do you think?
That's a great question. It's really kind of hard to say, because I think the whole treatment model itself is really broken. But I've seen it more so, I guess, in the support group. But sure. I think now that I'm saying this out loud, the reason why, when I was working as a psychiatric nurse, it was because I would say the vast majority of time, trauma and abuse and PTSD people were looked at in more of parts. Like, oh, you had PTSD. Oh, you have an abusive mother. Oh, you have bipolar disorder or schizoaffective disorder or whatever. It wasn't really seen as like the whole picture. And so like you have insomnia, you have depression. So each thing was treated individually instead of looked at
as a whole person.
Sort of like, really this one person in your life, if there's a very solid chance, like if you changed your job, if you moved out of your house, that a lot of this other stuff would resolve.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen it more so in the support groups with people that are like, has anybody else experienced this? Like I have hair loss, I've gained a bunch of weight, I'm not sleeping, or I'm sleeping too much, or I, um, I've just diagnosed with lupus or fibromyalgia or just all kinds of things. They're like, what's wrong with me? And a lot of that is a very normal response to an abnormal amount of stress.
Mm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, for sure. I don't know. I can't remember if I was the last one to do a question or not, but I have this one that I would
okay.
love to. It from AJ, she said, soul aching loneliness when you have all you have left is 3 young children and you're raising them with no support. I think it's important to address that. Um, I think one of the things that I would say is that I understand how that must feel. I felt some of that with one child by myself. I now have 3 children, but one's an adult, the one that I was in that situation with. Um, but I'll tell you something. I know it's even harder with 3 because it's expensive to pay for a babysitter. No one's supporting you. The thing I would do is get as involved as you can with groups online or whatever, but think about mommy meetup groups. Meetup.com is a great place, like Dana always says. And consider trading mommy time, right? So maybe you make friends with a mom in one of your groups, and one night you keep all the kids, and the next night or the next weekend she keeps all the kids, and then you take turns going out and having a life. I mean, there are just a lot of different things you can do. And even though you feel so stuck right now, just know that, girl, before you know it, they'll be adults. and you won't even know. Just I'm not trying to give you the old, guilt trip or anything, but I just mean to say, treasure the time you have with them. Do what you can to get through the hard moments. Reach out to other moms, even dads, if you can keep it platonic, for your own sake while you're healing. And consider doing trading babysitting nights so you can get a life outside of your kids. And then when you have mom friends or dad friends that you feel comfortable with, sometimes it's really easy to get together with your kids and their kids, and you guys hang out, have play dates, things like that. That helps a tremendous amount. And of course, I don't know if you're religious or anything, but if you are, going to church or synagogue is always useful because you meet other people who might be willing to help support you in different ways, and who might be decent people depending on where you're going. Dana, what thoughts would you add?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the idea of like mommy meetup groups. And, they even have groups where you can take your kids, where it's like, everybody that has a pug
Yeah.
is in a group, right? And they have like pug play dates, or they have, mommy and me or daddy and me kind of like single parent type groups where everybody goes to like the park and they have
Yeah.
lunch, or they go to, whatever, like generally low cost things with kids. And because I think there's a lot of people out there that are single parent, and they're like, I can't afford to go out. I don't, like, where do I even begin going out? But I want to meet other adults.
Yeah.
So how do I do this? And so, yeah, meetup.com. Great.
Mm-hmm. There's a group around here, and I think it's or a national group, at least United States, at least, called Parents Without Partners. It's been years since I've looked at them, but I actually went to several of their events as a single mom because I felt that same kind of soul crushing loneliness,
Mm-hmm.
and it was helpful to me at the time. So something to I just wanted AJ to know that you're not completely alone, even though it feels like you are, and it looks like you are where you're living right now. I want you to know that I've been there, and I bet you a lot of other people have been there in this, just right here in this moment, in this chat, in this moment, have experienced that feeling. I think I used the word soul crushing and described it that way, so it's hard and it's painful. And when you're the mom and you're responsible for all the things, it's exhausting and overwhelming. But as your kids get older, you can delegate little responsibilities to them. And pretty soon, before you know it, one of them will be old enough to babysit the other ones. Life will get a little easier.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And I also wanted to add too, because I liked your idea of if a person is religious or spiritual, like, getting kind of reconnected into a healthy, supportive, spiritual type community can work wonders. If you're not, even if you're atheist or agnostic, most communities have Unitarian churches.
True.
And those are non-denominational, and it's just more of the principle. It's more a humanist
Spiritual.
approach. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like love. And I went to a Unitarian church for a while after my breakup, because I was just like, I just need to be around people that like just they're just some good energy,
Mhm.
you know. So
Yeah.
there are options out there, and we hope that you find some, because
Yeah,
it is hard to be on your own out there.
it is. It is. And you know what? One more thing I want to add, and I don't know how long you want to go after this because we're running out of time and I have another meeting.
Okay. Yeah.
But really quick, I just want to add, don't don't guilt yourself into being miserable. Don't give yourself, don't weigh all the, don't put it all on your own shoulders. Give yourself a break sometimes. Give yourself like grace, and don't be, if somebody, one thing that I did an interview with somebody on my channel a while back who was going through a horrible divorce situation. And one of the things that she said as advice to people in her same situation, because she's also a single mom, I think she has 4 kids. And one of the things that she said was, don't be afraid to ask for help. It's so easy for us as survivors to want to do it all ourselves and not let anybody, in our little bubble, because we feel so like scared to let anyone touch our situation because we don't want everything to be messed up, because the last time we let someone in, they popped it, right? The bubble I was talking about. Point being, sometimes it's okay to ask for help. It's okay if you need financial help or babysitting help or whatever, to reach out to people you trust, and again, that's why that spiritual community can be really positive for you, as Dana said. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. I think that's all I have. I guess I'll just mention this real quick and then we'll wrap it up. But Bonnie mentioned kind of self-care, have to, with sleeping and that kind of thing, and says, yes, meditation, hypnosis, maybe yoga, things like that, self-care. There are, if you're into yoga, and if money is a challenge, there's tons of free yoga videos out there on YouTube. There's also tons of guided meditations and guided hypnosis. 2 of my favorite people right now on YouTube that do that is Jason Stevenson and Michael Seeley. And Michael Seeley does more hypnosis and Jason does more guided meditation. But if you're struggling with sleeping, if you're struggling with anxiety, these kinds of things, check those guys out because they're fantastic. So
okay,
that's all I got.
All righty. All right, everybody. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And we'll see you next week over on Angie's channel. So Angie Atkinson over on YouTube.
And just youtube.com/Angie Atkinson, all one word.
And you can find contact info down below after the video posts.
Sounds great. Thanks, Dana.
Okay, it was great seeing you.
You too. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.